So in this developer diary, I'd like to talk about Telltale Games, or well, specifically some modern Telltale games like Walking Dead and The Wolf Among Us, which I think are both really great games. And I mentioned in a previous one that I was a fan of Telltale Games, and I have their earlier, more adventure games. But it's interesting that the new genre is sort of like it basically interactive story. It's not about old adventure games finding items and combining them in strange ways. It's about making choices and driving an interactive story, which I think is sort of a great genre, and it's something I think a lot of people have aspired to create, but I don't think anyone's sort of nailed it as well as Telltale. And I think one of the interesting things to me in the later Telltale games is Sid Meier said games are a series of interesting choices, which I think is a really great way to talk about games. I think, games can be more than that, and some games don't really have a lot of interesting choices. They're more just eye candy or like, I don't know, Farmville or whatever, there's no sort of risk versus reward. It's just sort of like, do whatever you want, or like Sims, or where you create things, or there's a lot of games that aren't exactly interesting choices, but I think it's a really great way to look at games as a field. And so, like, the interactivity in Telltale Games is kind of low, and certainly this sort of balance between interactivity and the narrative and having the things you want to happen is it's a tough line to tread. And it's something that I think about a lot with Neverending Nightmares. But I think, and probably no one played it because it got really bad reviews, but I think Jurassic Park is a really interesting Telltale game to look at as far as interactivity. And I think it's very similar into The Walking Dead and those type of games, except for there's like two main differences. One is that you can't move your character, like, ever. You don't have control over the locomotion of your character, which I think was the worst choice they made, because I think, like, for whatever reason, that just adds so much. I mean, even if, like Walking Dead, you don't have a lot of places to walk. You're essentially just, walking from point A to point B. They could cut it and the game would be the same, but it really doesn't feel that you feel like you're, some FMV Laserdisc thing if you just can't drive your character around. So that's, like, huge, I think, to creating, a positive interactivity. And the other thing is that they push the idea of interesting choices in terms of the narrative. And they've done a really good job with this, with Walking Dead and Fables. And so, like, with Walking Dead, they always say, blankety blank will remember this. And it's interesting to me because I think to some extent it's very gamey. Like, they're saying that, this choice makes a difference. And, like, at least to me, and maybe I don't notice all the dialogue trees or whatever, but, like, I don't feel like some of those choices really do make a difference. And so to some extent I think they're almost cheating, by saying, this matters when it doesn't really matter that much. But I think it's very smart of them to do, because I think then people, feel like their choices matter more, even if they don't. And I think the illusion of choice is really important to doing interactive storytelling, because the choice is important. That's how you create a game, but it's very difficult to create a narrative that will handle all these choices. So, like, at least for me, with Neverending Nightmares, we're trying something a little different. We're trying a branching narrative, and that's it's very challenging. we've sort of had to scale back on that just because, it's been a lot more challenging than I had expected, which, I mean, yeah, a lot of people haven't done it, and it's tough, and like, you look at Discourse, they're going to do something with it, and I think that theirs is going to be very interesting as well. But I mean, theirs is sort of just a text box driven game, so we're trying to almost be more ambitious in terms of like different locations, different endings, different everything that's art, which is the problem we're running into with a branching narrative, is that we have to create all this new content, which is why no one's done it before. But it's important to me for Neverending Nightmares, so we're gonna deliver something in that regard, and hopefully it'll be something people can look at and say, what worked here, what didn't, how can we take it a step further, because I think it's the idea of a branching narrative is really cool, but in Walking Dead, I think 400 Days or something, they had something where, like, depending on your choices, different things happened, and then still the overall story arc, but at least in that one episode, like, they mattered significantly, and there was the end of season 1. I think they did a really good job of making your choices have emotional weight and matter. Certainly I felt guilty for some of the things I've done. So I mean, I think, another thing I like about The Wolf Among Us is that basically they ask you, like, oh, who do you think the villain is, they sort of get your involvement in the investigation. And I didn't play LA Noire, and it was kind of on my list of things to play. It seemed interesting, but the reception wasn't quite as warm as it would need to be to really motivate me to play it. But I like the idea of sort of that sort of film noir, or the hard-boiled detective story, and being a part of that. And while I wasn't really excited about the Wolves Among Us until I got the first episode free, and I just finished Walking Dead season 2 episode 1, and I'm like, oh, I want more, and I'm like, okay, well, I got this Fables thing for free, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, and I played the second episode, and I'm just like, crap, I'm stuck waiting for the episodes. Which again is another difficulty of episodic development, and something that is interesting, that like a lot of people are feeling like that's sort of a better way to consume a show, and with like the Netflix streaming shows, they release the seasons at once, and some people really like it, and some people maybe don't like it quite as much, but I feel like it's tough to complain, because you can just watch it whenever you want. So, I mean, I don't know, well, I guess the episodic development was a different blog, but, I mean, I think they really do a good job with the choices and making things matter, and finding the balance between, interactivity and, choices and sort of the fixed narrative, because, like, again, the choices you have in the Walking Dead and the Wolves Among Us are much more limited. I mean, even than previous Telltale Games or previous adventure games, because I mean, really, they're not adventure games anymore. It's sort of their own sort of thing, and I think their own sort of thing is great, and I think more developers should make games in that genre, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you call it, but anyway, so that's my thoughts on Telltale Games.